Okay, I'm back. Patrick Thaden here. Today I'm going to do a video. I'm going to talk a little bit about hinges and rosettes and a system that I came up with for making them in a fairly quick, efficient manner, especially if you're making a lot of parts. It works quite well. Um, I'll show you how I kind of used to make them and then how I've started making them more recently. I haven't made any in quite a while, so I say more recently as in when I was making these things full time. So there's I did study a lot of different metal techniques and processes. One of them, I looked a lot into jewelry and how jewelry was made in different processes and things. One of the things I came across about 20 years ago or so was the RT blanking system. They're sometimes also called pancake dies. Bonnie Doon used to make and sell, I think, a little jig fixture to help make these blanking dies. And the blanking dies are really slick. They're good for making a lot of parts very quickly, and they can be used for architectural stuff, for jewelry related stuff, for armor related stuff. I mean, they have a lot of uses. A friend of mine actually made some and was cutting out paper silhouettes and used them in his wedding invitations. So lots of different ways you can use these. They're pretty slick. I'll show a couple of them here. These are ones that I use specifically for armor related purposes. So here we have a Roman style hinge. This one here is more an Italian 15th century style hinge. Let's see, don't know how well these will focus in, hopefully pretty good. Larger rosette, butterfly. Hopefully you can see. Turn it around. There we go. So, I mean, I've made smaller ones are nice. They're handy. This is the largest one I've made. This was used for some architectural piece, decorative element. I don't remember. I made it a number of years ago. This one, I had a whole bunch of parts that I had to make where I was matching some existing reposade parts on a chandelier. So that's what that one got used for. So let's see. I'll talk a little bit about it. With the blanking dies, when you cut these out, typically it's done with a jeweler's saw. And I've heard of people doing them by hand, but I'm not sure how well they work. You just need to make them out of a heat treatable steel if you're going to be using them for cutting metal. The ones I've made have pretty tight tolerances, so they can shear really quite thin material without it smearing into the gap. When you're cutting with a jeweler's saw, if you cut vertical with the blade, you're removing the thickness of the blade, so it leaves a little bit of a gap between the two pieces of metal that you've cut. And so it has that opportunity to smear the metal down into the groove. If you pitch it just slightly, based on the thickness of the blade and the thickness of the material, you can actually have it so it creates a scissor action when you pass it through. And that's how these things work really well on thin material, is by having that little bit of a set to them. Years ago, I made a jig based on one that was available commercially. Let's see, you can probably see the table here is set at a little bit of an angle, and that's based on the thickness of the blade I'm using. I'm not sure if you can even make out the blade there, but the blade is set right here. And so this helps maintain a consistent angle as you cut all the way around. And this is just set on a slide here, so it just goes up and down relatively smoothly and easily. More recently, I came across one. This is designed so you can take a standard saw blade frame, jeweler's saw blade frame, and set it in here and use it. No idea if this was commercially made or homemade, but it's well done. Works very smoothly. So I'm going to talk about those, but I'll show real quick. So prior to figuring this out, I was typically taking and folding up my hinges, fitting the knuckles, cutting them in, and whatnot. And then I would make a little template. Let's see, like this here. I had a little steel template, holes punched in it and everything. And I could lay it over the top, and then I could shoot some spray paint on it or scribe around it and then cut it out. So I could make them relatively quick, and then I'm not having to hand lay out every single one. So it would look like that. And then, let's see if we can see it. and then you could punch the holes and everything, and it worked quite well. But it wasn't really fast. I'm going to show how quick these can be used. Okay, I'll show a rosette here. There's a smaller rosette than the last one. It's pretty nice. But I'll show how easy these are to use. So with this is half the rosette that we've got lined up here. So you need to make sure you're past halfway when you slide the material in. And first I saw these, you had to have a hydraulic press, and I was like, these are small. Do you really need a hydraulic press? I discovered, no, you don't need a hydraulic press. It can make it easier, especially if you're doing a larger die, but I'll show, this is just a block of aluminum, my anvil. You could potentially do it with a hammer, but you run the risk of striking unevenly. You could deform your die, you could break the die, damage it, you could warp it. So I found this does work. So there we've cut out half of it. What you do for the next step, slide it back in there. And I've spray painted these. If you notice, it was silver shiny there on the one side. I did that so it would help me line up the part for the second half. So get it lined up right where you want it. Doesn't seem to matter which way's up so much as you hit it evenly. And there you have a nice rosette. I'll go ahead and I'll actually stamp this one out, show you how it comes out. Got a little piece of rubber here, rosette. Got a dome punch here. I'll just show this one real quick how it goes. One could potentially make a little multi-headed tool that would strike all of them at the same time if you wanted as well. It's kind of warped up a little bit. Not sure if it'll focus and show you real well. No problem. Set it back down, put the rubber on top of it. Give it a smack. Flattens out nicely then. Not sure how well we're focused there. Hopefully it's focusing well enough that you guys can see it. You've got a roper punch, Whitney roper. These things are super handy. Line it up nicely. Punch the center one. There you have it. Quick and easy for those. So knock them out pretty fast if you set up everything real well. So you've got everything right where you want it. So the hinges are fun. That's one of those. Cutting hinges can be extremely tedious. You've got to sit there. You got to fold the metal in half, pinch the knuckle in, set your pin, your hinge pin. Get it set in there nice and tight. This is just a piece of 1/8" material here. But it can be time consuming, and then you've got to file in your profile or grind in your profile. You've got to cut the knuckles for the hinges. There's lots of different ways people do that as well. I will show one of these here real quick. Let's see, where did I put the Roman? We'll do this one. This is a bigger one. We'll show the Roman hinge here, how I fold these up. Scrap of metal. This is wider than the blank, or wider than the hinge blank needs to be, but that's okay. Just need to make sure, again, it's past where it needs to be. So this one's big enough. I probably could strike it like this, but I'm going to have to hit it really hard just because of the additional surface area. So I'm going to show another way that I do it. This is a treadle hammer I've got here. You stomp on it, comes down and hits pretty hard. I like it a lot for doing these. It's quite efficient. So cut it clean, sweet. So one of the things, because these are hand cut, there is some variance to them. I don't know if you can see the lobes there. They aren't quite symmetrical. So when you're doing a hinge or something that you're going to fold, you have to make sure that you flip it the correct direction. You need to flip it like this. If you just flip it around like that, you end up crossing the lobes and it won't line up properly. So let's see which way we're setting. There we go. So again, I've laid this one out, so I've got a silhouette to line up with. So line up the second half, nice and easy. Little smack. There we have our hinge blank. So from here, it can be done the same way that you would do any other hinge. You can take it. I like to get them started like this. It's convenient. Smack them down into the vise. Gets them folded up nicely. Get them about halfway. You do need to ensure that when you're closing them up, you close them up nice and straight. So one of the things that I did, you can put the pin in here and pinch it in the vise, close it up nicely. It does work pretty good. Years ago, when I was trying to make things quicker, more efficient, and consistent, I came up with this jig. It's got a couple of pins that help guide this up and down, and I had this set in an arbor press. Don't have an arbor press anymore to show you, otherwise I'd show you how this works as well, but I'll give a quick description. So you take your part like this, line up your pin in there, get it set. This would lift up. There's a little hole in the back side to help ensure that the pin is set correctly. You can see it here. And then set into the arbor press, it would just push down, squish it. Knuckles come out nice, clean, pretty every time. This wasn't done in there, but it pinches it down nicely like this does. So hopefully you can see it well enough. But yeah, so you'd get your two halves like this. You're 90% of the way there. The last thing is cutting in the knuckles. And people do that lots of different ways. Files, jeweler saw, hacksaw, cut off wheels, any number of things you can do to cut those knuckles in. I decided I needed something a little quicker than that and consistent because I hated spending all the time check and fit and check and fit and check and fit, make sure I get all my knuckles right. So I made this cutter setup. I bought the blades. Focus. I set up the spacing on these, and this will go in my milling machine. So I can set up my milling machine. It's really kind of handy. It'll actually cut the knuckles for you right there, nice and clean. So you just figure out your spacing based on your knuckles. Swipe right through it, nice and easy. They move well. Let's see if we can get up close enough here. Pretty much zero gap between them. You get it set right. Quite handy. Super slick. Way to do it. These blanking dies, I mean, let's see. It doesn't like to focus right there. So this is for a buckle. A buckle steel, I guess, the tab that you would attach to your leather or rivet to your armor if it's direct connection. So this can be made the same way. So I think that's about it, actually. I will put a link, RT blanking system. You can read up on it. It'll give you all the instructions on how to do it. There's a paper online that somebody uploaded. I think it was from 1980, but it goes through and explains it way more in depth than I will in this video, but super slick process. If you've got the time to do it, it's worth doing. I'll go into these just a little bit more. So these are actually just made out of 1050 carbon steel. You could use 4130. The first time I made one, it was made out of 01 tool steel, but I heat treat these the same way I would to heat treat a piece of armor. So it's not a big deal. These are quick and simple to make. To cut one out, you might be looking at about 30 to 45 minutes of cut time, depending on how efficient you are at cutting. And then, another 15 to 30 minutes of heat treat, depending on how you heat treat them. I typically would heat treat these in my gas forge and then temper them in a kiln, but you could heat treat them any number of ways. You just need to try and get a consistent, even heat when you do it. Quench them smooth so they don't warp too much on you. If they warp, it is obnoxious. But yeah, I'd say that's about it. Thank you.